there's a couple of stories. One in particular is a study that a Princeton theologian and researcher tells about what he found when he did some research. He did research on people who were good, people like you and I, people who have intentions of being good, people like the seminarians who go out with a mission for being good, people who want to follow in that way that the Samaritan exemplified. But what he found is that there's a distinct difference. He wanted to know why it is that some folks who are good actually do what they intend to do follow through, do make a difference, do intervene, do stop to help and to change things, and why other good people don't. He said it fundamentally, he found, is about a transformation that at some point in the person's life, the ones who decided, who were able to see and to stop and to do what needed to be done, to make the change, to follow through, were ones who'd had an experience of transformation in their life. And he illustrates his point with a man named Jack Casey. Jack Casey didn't have a childhood that would lead him necessarily to be the first in line for heroic efforts to step in and help another. He grew up in a less than healthy household with alcoholism and tough times, and didn't learn anything much about how to reach out to help others. But he does remember one formative thing in his life. When he was a child, he had to have surgery, and he was scared. And he remembers absolutely vividly. In fact, it was transformative for him that a nurse came and stayed with him while he was preparing to go into surgery. She looked at him and she told him, "I'm going to stay right here with you, and everything will be all right. And when you finish with the surgery, I'll be here." And good to her word, when he came out of surgery, he looked into her eyes as he regained consciousness. It changed him fundamentally somehow, such that after that life-transforming experience, many years later, as a young adult, as a man who was a paramedic in New York City, there was a car accident. The car was overturned, and the driver was pinned inside the car. The rescue squad was there to cut open the doors and to try to set him free, but there was huge risk involved because the fuel line had leaked, and the sparks from their tools could easily accidentally ignite the fuel and cause an explosion. Jack Casey was hailed in the newspaper as the Good Samaritan because he stayed with that man, telling him it was going to be all right. He wasn't going to leave him, that they'd get out of there. He risked his life for him. And afterwards, when all was well, thankfully, the man who had been the driver came to Jack Casey and said, "What were you thinking? That was stupid. You would have been killed easily. Why did you do that?" And his answer was, "I just couldn't leave you." Jack Casey's life had been changed because someone had been there for him. And he remembered that. How could he not be there for someone else? That's why you and I come here Sunday after Sunday, week after week, to remember in ways that transform our lives, so that we just don't know the right answer to who's my neighbor and understand what it is that we're supposed to do, but have the courage to actually do what it is that needs to be done in the face of harsh realities. To have the courage because we remember what's been done for us. This is a place where we come week after week to remember we're the one in the ditch, by the roadside, broken and in need of saving. That Jesus is the one who comes by our side and doesn't pass by, but stops to care for us until we are restored to wholeness. This is a place where we come to remember that God in his infinite mercy and love reaches out to save us. And it's in that remembering that our lives are changed week after week, Sunday after Sunday, moment after moment, so that we in turn, when we encounter it in other people, have had that kind of changed life, that experience of remembering that gives us the courage to do the same for another, to recognize, I just can't pass by. How can I not care for this human being when I've been loved by God in that way? The other thing that I think keeps us from doing that is fear. Martin Luther King, the night before his assassination, was preaching, and he preached about this parable of the Good Samaritan. And he talked about how the fear that people have, in particular, the fear that the priest and the Levite exemplify, perhaps, because he said, Mrs. King and I have gone down that road from Jerusalem to Jericho, and it is a treacherous road. It is scary even without the robbers, but it's the perfect hideout for robbers down this windy, scary road. He can see why such an incident might happen and why you'd be afraid. But he said the difference between the priest and Levite and the Samaritan is the difference in the questions they ask themselves. The priest and Levite ask, what will happen to me if I stop? But the Samaritan's question is, what will happen to him if I don't? You and I are called by the plumb line that God sets before us, not to measure what we do by what others are doing around us, but to measure what we do by God's actions of love and saving grace towards us. So how can we not? To measure our actions by the need of the other and what will happen if we don't, not our fears about what will happen to us if we do. We have to get inside the mind's eye of our God and of others in order for us to be able to actually have the courage to do what the Samaritan did. This past week I had the funniest experience, this prayer that is my prayer for you on this day of remembering the Good Samaritan. It was told to me by a woman at Vickers Landing whose great-grandson was saying the table blessing. You know, the blessing that you all probably know by heart and that he obviously had heard every meal of his life so that it was second nature to him. Bless, O Lord, this food to our use and our lives to your loving service, and keep us ever mindful of the needs of others. That's the first sense in which this parable calls us to act, keeping us mindful of the needs of others. But this young man got it a little different. And at first I thought it was just funny, and then I realized it was profound. He sat down at the dinner table and said, bless, O Lord, this food to our use and our lives to your loving service, and keep us ever needful of the minds of others. Keep us ever needful of the minds of others. Left to our own minds, we'll know and understand what's right to do, but we won't have the courage to actually do it. But by being needful of the mind of God and God's love and care for us, and needful of the minds of others, what it's like to be in their place, for us to be the recipient of even a Samaritan's help, to be able to ask the question, not what will happen to me if I do stop, but what will happen to them if I don't. To keep us ever needful of the minds of others completes the prayer. It helps us not only know what it is we're supposed to do, but to follow Jesus and having the courage to do it. Amen.